Welcome to the Happy Sensory Corner in Special Education podcast, where we ask leaders and teachers in special education to share their insights and experiences to better understand how we can support students in special ed. The focus at moment with this episode is going to be on the use of restraints and how we can reduce them as much as possible. Before we start our interview, I'd like to introduce our guests. And our first guest is Alexis Seidner. She is a special education teacher at the District of Columbia Public Schools. She teaches a class for children with autism. This is a bit of a change in direction where we've been interviewing special education directors. But Alexis, you responded to our call for interviews dealing with reducing restraints, and I think it's going to be really interesting to learn from someone in the proverbial trenches, you know? So welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being on the show, especially because I can hear you have students. You must be in your classroom right now.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on this podcast. I am currently in my classroom, and the lights are a little bit dark because my students are in their nap time. And I have some students that will probably not nap throughout the entire time, and some of them that are already asleep. But if you hear any interruptions, it's probably one of my students.
All right. Um, and we're also here, obviously, with Claudie Pomares. She is the creator of Sensory Enrichment Therapy. She's our science officer. Sensory enrichment therapy is an evidence-based brain stimulation program to improve the behavior regulation and learning abilities of all students, especially those who struggle the most. And Claudie, you will be doing a short training on a sensory enrichment protocol at the end of our interview. So everybody stick
So,
around.
yeah, don't go before I talk.
And I am your host. I'm Kim Pomares. I'm the CEO at Mendability. For those of you paying attention, yes, I have the same family name as Claudie, and that's because she is my mom. A while back, Claudie needed help to manage her private clinic as it was growing with government funding and projects. And I said to her, sure, let me help you, and I'll go back to my other business. That was 25 years ago. So to start with, Alexis, tell us a little bit about what inspired you to get into special education.
So I'm the youngest of three. I have two older brothers, and I think for me, I was always interested in like playing with the kids and being with the kids and like just like having fun with the kids. I always ended up at the kids' table, maybe because I was the youngest one. But more so when I entered middle school and high school, I started working with younger kids in my community and started to like really get interested in being working with them and trying to teach them new activities and new like values and like different different ways. So more about like moving around and not just sitting down and writing and like using stuff. I always would love to get dirty, and when it was project time, I would be the one to be like ready to get dirty. So then when I entered high school, I did AP psychology and I fell in love with psych. And then around 11th grade, I already knew what program I wanted to do. So I went to BU and I studied special ed with a focus on severe disabilities. And I am so happy I studied there. I learned so much. I graduated a few years ago, so I'm still in like my third year of teaching. But I had a lot of student teaching experiences with a variety of disabilities, especially in all ages from 3 years old to 22 years old. And I don't know, I've always wanted to find ways to let everybody access things that neurotypical people access regularly and that we might take for granted, and how to teach these like social skills and life skills explicitly, and to also for me I think the most important, like I learn more from them than I think they learn from me, because you learn a lot about communication, a lot about what behavior and what like the body and how important the body is to communicate what they're feeling, what they want, what they need. And yeah, I don't know. I've always been interested in working with kids.
It's really I mean, we've done many episodes now, and every story has a very common thread, and that is it's very fulfilling to work with children who need extra help. And this is why Claudie and I are in this. This is why 25 years ago I never left. This is why we're doing this. So let's talk about reducing restraints. It's a big deal, you know, it's a word, it's a last resort, it's very dramatic, and it means that in a sense we have failed to prevent something, or we it feels there's so much negative baggage. So let's see if we can learn from one another about what you do, maybe in your classroom, or what you have seen done that worked really well, or is there a program that you brought in that was particularly successful? And also, is there a nightmare story that we could all learn from?
So I've in one of my student teaching experience, I had a student who would, when she would get angry, um, would start trying to throw things, hit you, scratch you. And something that I thought was very useful, instead of using restraints and also like the possibility of the kid hurting you, we had mats in the classroom, and we would, when it got very escalated, we would grab the mat and put it around the child. This child was around like third and fourth grade, so we were able to manage it. But we had a mat that we would put around the child, and we would just hold the mat. We would like ignore the behavior, redirect to what we wanted we wanted her to do. Also give her time to calm down, because she had a communication disorder, which would probably block her from like calming down. And this is why her like tantrums or her reactions were very long. So we would use instead of like holding her down, or like we would put a mat around her, and she would like slowly like calm down, probably because there were less distractions. It was like a closer space, it was quieter. Some other kids were got out of the classroom, and this would help her calm down faster, and without us trying to like hold her down from
And
eventually like throwing stuff.
when you say you put a mat around her, you didn't wrap her in the mat.
No,
You sort of created a thick wall,
yeah,
a
it was like
padded wall.
creating a padded wall for her to like. It also like created a little bit more darkness, so if I'm not wrong, because I think sometimes darkness can calm down the sensory system. With too much light, it was maybe overstimulating, and so this would help her, so she would have her space. We would obviously like make sure she's not like hurting herself, but she would like kick the mat and try to move us, but it would help us and her not to like grab her all the time.
Claudia,
Mhm.
do you want to comment on the Mendability Minute and maybe I see a lot of overlap, right? But I feel like, oh, let's talk about this because I think it would correlate very well. We teach uh, one of the free training that we give to special educators and teams is something we call the Mendability Minute or the sensory start. We called it the sensory start at the beginning, but it was a way of welcoming children into a classroom environment that was soothing, but also engaged some key brain functions in the brain so that the children would not just calm down, but then be ready for teaching, ready to engage with their attention span levels all the way up and motivated to learn. Claudie, do you want to give because what you did, you talked about dimming the lights, and it's actually one of the things, one of the steps that we teach. Claudie.
Yeah, yeah, you're absolutely right. Too much light is aggravating. One of the things we know about children, and because you work with children with autism, then I can sort of focus on that. Their visual system is way better than ours. What we have found, not me, scientists who focused on the visual system of kids with autism and adults, is that in their brain, the visual system is way bigger and way more connected than any typical person. What that means, unfortunately, it was found that that enormous visual system was not well connected to the rest of the brain. So they could not make a lot of sense of what they see. They see everything. They see a fly in the other side of the room. They see the action through the window, if there is a window. They see the little glitter through in an array of light. And everything is at the same level. They cannot just process only what's needed. And we know about the visual system that it is the fastest to grab information for everybody, not just for them, that it takes milliseconds to process an information. So as they move and move their heads, they are bombarded by visual information that is gradually overwhelming. So dimming the light is certainly the first thing to do. But in the sensory minute that we talk about, that we train the teachers about, the first thing that we do is dim the light as the kids are coming into the classroom. So they are welcomed into a class that is a little darker. And we also play beautiful instrumental music. And as Mendability, we are working on the brain. We are sending messages to the brain, not really teaching skills to the children. But the wonderful thing about neuroscience is that we know what we can do to help them feel better and not explode when they feel like it by doing those sensory things. And instrumental music, science has told us, increases two of the messengers in the brain. One is called serotonin, the other is called dopamine. We want serotonin for our kids on the spectrum because they don't produce enough. And so that leads to not being able to relax, to being overwhelmed by all sensory information, except music that is balanced. It doesn't need to be classical. It just needs to be orchestral. So any piece, even a score of a movie, something that you enjoy listening because you need the extra support as you welcome the children. You are ahead of a day that's going to be very busy. So you get this extra boost as well. So dim light, orchestral music, and on the smart board, if you have one, we play a slideshow of pieces of art. And while we believe, okay, it's so sophisticated, maybe only adults enjoy art, well, that's a wrong conception. All children, and I would say in particular children on the spectrum who see so well, they can enjoy, and they do enjoy, the projection of beautiful art sliding at the right pace, not too fast, not too slow. And we find, and all the teachers who have implemented the sensory minute or the Mendability Minute tell us the children go to their seats calmly. They do not start escalating by the time they are at the chair or starting to shuffle through their bags. They just sit down and calm and are ready to learn, whichever the teacher is ready to teach at that moment. So those three sensory information are obviously environmental, right? We're changing the dimension of the whole room. There is not as much visual except for the art. And there is this beautiful auditory information that is soothing for the brain and also prepares the attention span needed for learning. And there is one element that is essential, and we find, and maybe you'll tell us different, maybe in your classroom is different, but we find that the sense of smell is not used a lot in the schools. There is a lot of things that about allergies or headaches. We don't use it while it is an incredible tool. So what our teachers do who get the training, they give a little cotton pad or anything that the kid can manipulate without creating a drama, like chewing on the cotton ball, depending what the kid will tolerate, maybe a little stuffed toy, anything that has a nice scent. So the kid goes to their room and they just cannot help smelling. a lot of children on the spectrum do not have the spontaneous sniffing system. Like we sniff something new. But we learn that gradually, day by day, after a week or two, all the kids are just holding the scent to their nose with delight. They go and sit down. They are listening to the music. They are peaceful. And we know because we work with families, we work with parents. I teach parents personally, and they all say, like, time before.
Sorry, 1 second.
Yes.
Sorry.
No.
Do you need to go and attend to one of the students?
No, it's fine. The student was asking me a question. But...
Oh, okay. So, like, you are the receiving end of a lot of tension at home, getting the child ready, getting in the school, or getting in the bus. So the child, before getting into the classroom, already pretty up into their energy. So that sensory moment is really fabulous. We have heard only wonderful testimonials from schools. And so what is your feeling about it?
Yeah, you know what? I am a sensitive person to smells, and I think I don't know why schools haven't used that strategy more. Maybe you're right. Maybe it's because of allergies or something. But sorry. But usually I also like some scents calm you down, like lavender, eucalyptus, and maybe putting it on a little like stuffed that toy and putting in like the stuffed toy on each student's seat, and they go sit down and they know where their seats are, so they'll smell that. And maybe some days for one of my students, sometimes it's very hard to come into class, and I never had thought of that, and now that you told me that, and I look forward to trying some that one of these days.
I'll send you a link. We like to use candy flavoring oils because they're meant to be diluted into candy, so they're safe to be ingested. But also, we've had people complain about getting headaches and being sensitive when they were using essential oils or other types of scented products, but not for candy flavors. So I'm really hoping that you're not going to get any negative, experience around that. And so I send you a link to those. You can find them on Amazon pretty easily. There's lots of manufacturers. And you can just put a drop on a cotton ball and put the cotton ball inside one of those taste cups, with lids. And then you end up with really cool fine motor exercise if you need to, because they really want to open the thing to find out what's inside it. And then another tip is instead of giving them one to smell, you can give them two when they come into the room, say, which one do you want to use today? And then all of a sudden, it's not a choice between doing or not doing, but which one of the two good things you want them to do, they're going to pick. You can use that. I mean, sure, you're special ed teachers. You probably use this technique already. When you want them to do something you want, you give them options to two different things to do instead of, do you want to do what I tell you or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah. Sorry,
No,
Kim.
go ahead.
You were saying something.
I was going to ask follow-up questions on how you guys track reducing restraints. Is this an issue that is being tracked officially by your school system? How do you report it?
So I'm not sure how DC public schools is really big, but and I don't know how they do it, but in my classroom, I do work with younger kids, so it's a little bit different. But let's say one of my kids right now has like a schedule. Doesn't have a schedule, has like we're doing data on his behavior, because when he gets very frustrated, he starts to kick and scratch himself, like throw himself to the floor. So when it starts to be self-harm or harm to others, that's when we have to intervene. So we try to always use like more of like hugging technique instead of like grabbing, and putting the arms in like this, so the kids can't like scratch themselves or hit or throw anything. And we have a like a sheet of like tallies and times of when the behavior occurs. So we kind of know, like an FBA, like kind of know when, how to prevent this. Is usually by providing the kid with a visual schedule. Usually happens when we take a preferred item away. What I did one of these days to calm him down, and it worked, was using a Go Noodle video of like a breathing technique, and the kid was able to calm down. We've also used like stress balls where he can just squish the ball, and that way he calms down. But as a like a district, I'm not sure exactly what they do.
Is there a training program that you have introduced or that they have told you to introduce into your classroom that you found really successful?
And I'm not sure if it's a training program, but the behavior specialist that comes to my school at least once a week, it talks to us about using like making it very predictable for the students so the behavior doesn't appear or like they don't uh, escalate very quickly. So reminding them that maybe if that day there's something, a change in the routine, like, oh, it's picture day or we have a drill, trying to like use a lot of visuals before and show them like what's going to happen in the day. And I'm not sure if they do this here, but when I worked in Boston, teachers weren't allowed to like restrain the students. You had to be part of the team, and when a teacher would call team, it's usually the wellness professionals and administration that are trained in proper restraints, but not the teachers. Here in DCPS, I'm not sure exactly how it works. I haven't been here that long.
So it sounds
And
like the DC Public Schools has hired some functional behavior analysts to go around and train the teachers
yeah,
on some of those things. So
yeah.
is there okay, so that's useful to know. I'm thinking, okay, now I'm a special ed director. I'm listening to this. What else would I want to know? I think, Claudie, what you trained on the Mendability Minute and the sensory start was really useful. I think I love, I like your technique of the wall of foam, the wall of the mat, the foam mat.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think that's a new idea that I haven't heard before. It seems
Yeah,
it's
I wish more schools had that like access to like more like built-in sensory rooms into schools. I think that would be awesome where we could like sometimes if a kid is struggling to like de-escalate themselves, and maybe a room of like literally a foam room where kids can go in and
Yeah,
like
if I can comment on that, you seem a very special educator because of the passion and also the respect you give to the child, the way you explain how you surround the child in a protective way, but in a respectful way. You don't prevent her from moving. Or I love how you talk about the hug. So let me add a little bit to that, if you don't mind, because you find that lavender is soothing. I think that this child who has escalated to the point that you have to intervene, have maybe a cotton pad, something with lavender scent, because it works for you. And in fact, it's one of the few smells that has been studied as being relaxing. So you can put it on both of your shoulders as you are giving the hug to the child, because the scent is going to go to the brain and help the brain settle as you are preventing injury. So that gives an additional dimension
And
that
what
will
about
have.
getting them to hold the something really cold because it looks like their hands are part of the problem
oh, something
and you
really
would give
cool.
them something to
Yes,
do.
yeah, that's one of
Oh
our protocol, in fact. So
Have
one
you,
thing,
Alexis, have you attended one of our webinars on de-esc
no,
meltdown de-escalation?
no,
you
but
should.
now I will definitely do that
I'll
because I
send
want to
you a
know
link
more.
as well about that. We've got a session tomorrow at, I can't remember the time, but there's another one on Friday. So if you can attend those.
Yeah, I would
this
love
is
to.
almost a magical protocol that it takes seconds to calm the most infuriated little person. So you definitely want to be there. But the one thing that you can do if something happens today is grab a tea towel if you have them, or a bunch of wet wipes if you have them around, something that can be put under the water cold. And because you're having some intervention around the hands, when you have positioned his hands, you wrap the two hands with the cold towel, and then you do the hug that has also a scent.
Wow,
Um,
this is I'm like shocked in such a good way. Like I think this is amazing. I wish I had learned this in college also, because I don't know why schools don't include a lot of like sensory like steps to calm students down, even in gen ed, like not only
yeah,
kids with disability, because I've seen people in gen ed escalate when very little things could change that
yes,
escalation.
absolutely. And you are young in your career, please tell your friends and your colleagues and talk to your director, share once you have experienced it. And you can tell this is what happened when I did that. Because one thing, when you talk about the sensory room, there is something that is sold to the school that costs a lot of money. And is not really as efficient as the small thing that we are sharing with you that costs nothing. No cost is the right key for schools which don't have budget. Even the very, very big school, they do not have enough money to or space. So all the things that we teach you today, or things that we would teach you or teach the school, are about tiny, very simple things that work right away and don't cost. So, yeah, you are the right person. And I'm so pleased that we had a moment with you today, because first you're going to use it, but hopefully you are going to share it around, and we can help even more children.
Yes, that's for sure.
I think it's a good time to wrap up. I'm going to say thank you very much for your time during this podcast. It was really cool to interview a teacher rather than a director, somebody who's in the trenches. It felt very practical. Thank you, Claudie, for training us on the sensory start and the variation on the meltdown, the de-escalation. I think for tomorrow's webinar, we could talk about what happens during a restraint and turn a restraint moment into a mendability approved de-escalation protocol. You know, this idea
Yeah.
of the scented hug and to get them to hold something cold during that moment could be really cool. So thank you for your contribution to the webinar for tomorrow. And everybody, thank you again, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so
Okay.
much for having me.
Thank you so much, Alexi. Bye bye.